Okay, Bes Hashem, today is Erev Shabbos Kodesh Parsha Shoftim Rosh Chodesh Elul, and today's daf is Chulin daf Kuvav. We are holding 3 lines down from the top of the Amud of Kuvav Amud Aleph. Ki Oser Abdimi Omar. Again, the Gemara is discussing the halachas of Maim Rishonim, Maim Achreinim, and the Gemara goes like this: Ki Oser Abdimi Omar. When Rav Dimi came from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said, now we have many members throughout Shas about Rav Dimi. There is more to the story about when he came, I believe, in the second parak of Bava Basra. But Rav Dimi Omar, Mayim Harishainim Echilu B'Sar Chazir, a person's failure to wash Mayim Rishainim at the beginning of the Suda fed him Chazer. What does that mean? Because someone didn't wash his hands before a meal, he ended up eating Chazer. There was a Jewish person who owned a restaurant who served kosher food to, let's just see what Rashi says, Sheikhen B'ni Yisrael. There was a store owner, Meicha Basar Shchuta Yisrael, who would sell kosher meat to Jewish people in Mavashal, and he would cook in a machila, and he would feed them. And when the guy would come to his store, he would serve him non-kosher meat. A Jewish fellow came to the store to wash his hand, to eat, and he didn't wash his hands. So he thought that this person was a guy, so he fed him chazer. Achreinim haitziu es ish mibayla, and another person's failure to wash mayim achreinim removed a woman from her husband. And the Gemara also continues, v'hargu es hanefesh. Rashi has that in the Girsa in the Gemara. So Zok Rashi, but Park Basud Yuma, the last Park Yuma, but with the Kidar Ikulamand Amar Katl, Ikulamand Amar Katla ala Afka. So what's going on over here? The Gemara Yuma Daf Pegimel Amad Bey says that Remei Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi stayed at a certain inn over Shabbos. Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yossi entrusted their money with the innkeeper. His name was Kidar. After Shabbos, Kidar denied having been entrusted with their money. Noticing that there were lentils on Kidar's mustache, the Chachamim went to his wife and said to her, your husband says that you should return our purses, so that you will know we are telling the truth. He told us to mention that the two of you ate lentils today. She fell for their trick and returned the purses to them. There are two Girsois as to what happened next. According to one version of the Gemara, Kidar got so angry at his wife that he killed her, and according to the other version, he just divorced her. It was with respect to this incident that Rav Dimi, who taught the later version of the Gemara, stated that a person's failure to wash mayim achreinim removed a woman from her husband. For had he washed his hands at the end of the meal, he presumably would have washed away the food from his mustache with his wet hand, as men typically do, and the lentils would not have been seen. The Rif brings this incident as another reason why mayim achreinim are a chayva, even when there's no melech sedaimis. However, there does not seem to be a halachic requirement to brush off one's mustache after eating, although many people do handle about trimming, shaving, v'chulu mustaches, but not for now. So that's why my machrein metiu is ish mibayla hargu es nefesh. It's either haitu ish mibayla or hargu es nefesh, based on the story in the Gemara Yuma. Also, Rabban Amar, when Rabban came later from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, he said the following story: Rishayim echilu b'sar nevela, a person's failure to wash mayim rishayim venom nevela, achreinim hargu es nefesh. Another person's failure to wash mayim achreinim killed somebody, as we just explained. Amar Nachem Yitzchak said simonech, and the way to remember which one said what. Also Rav Dimi Avka, also Ravin Katla. Rav Dimi came first and said that the husband removed her, and Ravin came later and says that the husband killed her. The simon is to imagine that both versions are correct, and that Kidar both divorced his wife and killed her. Obviously he did both. He certainly divorced her first. He couldn't have divorced her after she was dead. Since it's common knowledge Rav Dimi came to Babel before Ravin, one could easily remember that Rav Dimi reported that he divorced her, and Ravin reported that he killed her. Reb Abba Masni Chad Mehani Bechad Mehani Lechumra. Reb Abba taught a version that follows one of these two nuschos in one case, and the other one in the other two of the cases, reflecting the more chomor of the two. Itmar, this is Lagabe Mayim Rishayin, and we learned Chameh or water that was heated by fire. Chizkiya Almar Chizkiya says Einit Lamehem Layadayim, you cannot use them to wash your hands before eating. Rabbi Yechon said Neit Lamehem Layadayim, you may use them to wash your hands before eating. I mean, water from an urn is very hot, let's say. Rabbi Yechanan said, Sha'alti Esram Gamliel b'nai shel Rebbe, Esram Gamliel, the son of Rebbe, v'eichel taras, and he was a person who was makbet to eat everything, b'tarav, Amali kol gedele golel oisenkein. It was common practice for all the gedolim of the golel to do so, meaning to wash their hands, to wash their hands with water that was heated by fire. It was obviously warm and not scalding water, because it's inconceivable that people would commonly wash with such boiling hot water. Let's see what Rashi says. Okay. Concerning the hot springs in Tveria, Chizkiya Omar, you may not use them to wash your hands before eating them. But you may be tevel your hands in them before eating. If they're gathered in a mikvah 40 saw, although such water is no good for netilas yadayim, it's good for tevilas yadayim. What is tevilas yadayim? So it's a Mishnah in Chagigo that there's two methods of being metahar a person's hand. Netilas yadayim, the way we know it, using a keli with the revius water and pouring the water over one's hands. Or the second way is by tevilas yadayim, being tevel one's hands in a mikvah, which contain 40 saw. As the Mishnah says, that tevilas yadayim is more effective and that it renders the hands tahor even for kachim, while netilas yadayim is only good for chulin and truma. And it should be noted that both the netilas yadayim and tevilas yadayim are only midrabanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, "Kol kufay tevel v'hem," a person could be tevel his entire body in a mikvah of 40 saw of the chamei Tveria, and avalei panav yad v'raglav, but not his face, hands, and feet. Why is that? Although a mikvah of chamei Tveria is a valid mikvah for being tevel one's entire body, it's no good for tevilas yadayim, and it does not make the hands of the person who's tevel in them tahor to eat bread. Rashi explains that the tevila of one's face and feet have no halachic significance. For wherever tevilas yadayim is good, you only need the hands, the face, and the feet make them. Without the face and feet make them tahor alone, there's no such thing as being tevel hands and feet. There is an inyan to wash them for Shabbos, but not hands and feet for Tara purposes. Hashta kol gufay tevel b'hem. Now, if the chamei Tveria are a kosher mikvah, then one is definitely able to be tevel his whole body in them. So panav yad the regular kosher kain. So shouldn't it be that it's a kosher mikvah to allow a person to be tevel his hands and face and feet in them? Amar Papa says, and chamei Tveria are in a hole in the ground which contain 40 saw, where it's a kosher mikvah according to everybody. So mishkal minai b'mana. On the other hand, so obviously it's going to work to be mitahar or to be used for tevilas yadayim. But mishkal minai b'mana, on the other hand, to take from the chamei Tveria and a keli and pour them over one's hands, everyone agrees that that wouldn't work. While everyone agrees that the chamei Tveria is valid for tevilas yadayim, they all agree that such water is no good for netilas yadayim, which is performed by pouring the water from a keli over the hands. Okay, the author keep pligi. Where do Chizkiya and Rabbi Yochanan argue the baskinu bebas birta, where one separated a portion of the mikvah's water into a small channel which doesn't contain 40 saw to be a valid mikvah on its own, but remains halachically connected to the source mikvah from which it emerged. So as such, even the water in the channel itself is halachically valid mikvah, which is in essence fit for tevilas yadayim. And Rabbi Yochanan invalidates it only on account of Hidin d'Rabbanan, as the Gemara will explain. Marsava Gazrina Bas Berta Atumana, Marsava Gazrina. Rabbi Yochanan holds that we're geyser that being tevel one's hands in the channel that he made is no good, because a person might come to wash his hands with the channel's water using a keli, meaning although the channel is connected to a mikveh and is itself a kosher mikveh, is concerned that one won't take note of the fact that the channel is only connected to the mikveh and will be tevel yadayim there. But Chizkiya holds that we don't make such a decree, because since the channel is halachically connected to the mikveh and is itself a valid mikvah, there's no concern that one would confuse being tevel one's hands in the channel containing the chamei Tveria with pouring such water from a keli, saying that such water is kosher for tevilas yadayim. It is likewise kosher for netilas yadayim. Now the Gemara says that this is actually a machlekes tanoim ketanoi, like we learned in a brisa. Chizkiya and Rabbi Yochanan are arguing the same machlekes as the tanoim in the following brisa. Now this is halacha l'maisa, very important, and we know about this lahalacha. Where do we have this? This is also it is the Tosefta in Yadayim, but it comes up in halacha, so it's good to know. Okay, water that became unfit for drinking by an animal, meaning the water is so hot or the water is so dirty that even an animal won't drink from it. Now we're talking about really dirty water. What we consider dirty water today, people in those days would probably drink it lechatchila. But kelim psulim, if such waters aren't kelim that are no good for pouring them over one's hands to make them tahor, because the Chachamim said that netilas yadayim is valid only with water fit for drinking by an animal, like the Mishnah says in Yodayim, but karka ksherin. However, if they're in the ground, then it's kosher for being tevel one's hands in them. For any gathering of mem sa constitutes a kosher mikvah, even if the water is dirty and unfit for drinking by an animal, and memela would be good for tevilas yadayim. Reb Shimon Elazar says af bekarka, even when they're in the ground, Tevel ben kol gufa, a person could be tevel his whole body in them. Avaloi panav yad ragla, but not his face, hands, or feet. Hasha kol gufa tevel ben yad ragla kol shekain. Now here too, the same question can be asked of Reb Shimon ben Elazar. If the waters unfit for drinking by an animal are deemed a kosher mikvah, and one is able to be tevel his whole body in them, so then why isn't it good enough to be able to be tevel his hands and feet in them? As we mentioned earlier in the Gemara, rather we're talking about where one separated a portion of the dirty mikvah's water into a small channel of a pligi, and this is what and they're arguing at this very point. The Marsava Gazrina Basbirta Tumana, Marsava Le Gazrina. Reb Shimon Elazar holds that we're geyser that being tevel one's hands in the channel is no good because a person might come to wash with the dirty water using a kli, and that's going to be a problem. But the Tanakama holds that we don't make such a gezerah, just like we had in the Gemara previously. Again, we have Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ashiyon. Rabbi Baraban said, in the name of Rabbi Yitzchak bar Ashiyon, Netilas Yadayim l'chulin mipnei srach truma. Washing hands for bread of chulin is necessary in order to establish a routine for truma. What are we talking about over here? The Chachamim with geyser a general status of sheni latoma on stam yadayim. Stam yadayim mean ordinary unwashed hands, meaning they decree that all unwashed hands, even where the hands are not known to have touched anything tameh, are considered a sheni latoma, which can transmit tuma to and render ulcer any truma or kacham that they touch. The reason they were geyser on this is because it's quite likely that without knowing, the person touched parts of his body which were sweaty or otherwise unclean, and then if he touches truma or kaidesh, the kacham could become dirty or even unedible. So to avoid such irreverent treatment of kacham, the Chachamim declare that unwashed hands always have a status of a sheni, thereby forcing anyone who plans to handle truma or kaidesh to wash his hands beforehand. The Chachamim allowed for this tuma to be removed through being mitar the hands alone, either by washing them from a keli through netilas yadayim, or being tevel them in a mikvah with tevilas yadayim, without the need for the person to be tevel his entire body. The hands that remain tahar, as long as the person doesn't divert his attention from them, has a chatas and is mindful of what he touches. Since a sheni latoma transmits toma only to truma and kacham and not to chulin, it follows that stam yadayim, which are decreed only a sheni latoma, do not transmit toma to chulin, and then there is no need to wash one's hands before touching or eating chulin. So the gzera d'Rabbana, the one who eats even bread of chulin and must wash his hands, requires an explanation. So what is the explanation? Meaning it's necessary to require netilas yadayim even for eating chulin in order to accustom kehanim who eat truma to wash their hands regularly. Although kehanim must wash their hands for all truma produce, whether they eat it or touch it, the chachamim nevertheless the Gemara continues that netilas yadayim l'chulin mipnei srach truma. So it's necessary to require netilas yadayim even for eating chulin in order to accustom kehanim who eat truma to wash their hands. Although kehanim must wash their hands for all truma, the chachamim were geyser that this requirement should be only to a person eating chulin, where it's kam that one touches the food, and only to bread since it's consumed as a meal rather than as a snack, which is interesting. Because, if a person doesn't touch the food, if he eats it in the bag or wearing gloves, then many hold that you don't have to wash. But mishum mitzvah, and also because it's a mitzvah. In fact, the Gemara, my mitzvah. What do you mean? There's no pasuk that tells anybody that you have to wash your hands before eating. Mitzvah l'shmei l'derech chachamim. It's a mitzvah to heed the directives of the chachamim, who decreed that netilas yadayim is for eating bread. Now, there is a concept from Shlomo HaMelech, the Gemara Eruvin says, that was Masak and netilas yadayim. Maybe it's referring to that. But Rava says mitzvah l'shmai divrei Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch. The mitzvah to listen to Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch, because Taisha says that Rava doesn't mean to say that it's an actual mitzvah of the Torah, but rather it's a rabbinical mitzvah that has an asmachta in the Torah, as we shall soon see. The pasuk state like this: anyone who touches him the zav, do not wash his hands in water, should be tamei. Rabbi Elazar ben Aruch says, from here the Chacham found support in the Torah for instituting the takana of washing hands before eating bread. The expression samchu chachamim indicates it's not a true mitzvah deraisa, but merely an asmachta, which is an allusion from, not an illusion, but an allusion to a din d'Rabbanan from a pasuk in the Torah. Amalei Rav Nachman. Rav said to Rav Nachman, "My mashma, what exactly in this pasuk tells me that? The pasuk says that he didn't wash his hands in the water, and then he is tameh, hashatav tahor. However, according to the simple reading of the pasuk, if a person who touches the zav washes his hands, he's tahor. Perfecti gemara hatvila boy. This is not true because the person who touches the zav certainly needs tefillah in a mikvah in order to become tahor, and it's not enough to just wash his hands. El hachi kamar. Anyone who touches the zav and so to another person who didn't wash his hands in water should be tameh, meaning the pasuk is referring to two people. Number one, a person who touched the zav, and number two, who didn't wash his hands. The pasuk teaches that both are tameh to some degree. The former is original tameh and requires tefillah, and the second is tameh only with respect to eating bread and requires only netilas yadayim. The Chachamim didn't mention washing hands for produce other than bread only because of cleanliness. So the Talmidim assume that he meant to say there's no chiyuv, but ha-mitzvah ika, but about it is a mitzvah to do it. Rabbi said to them, it's not a mitzvah or a chayva, but it is optional. Rabbi's statement is understood to mean that the Chachamim never enacted an netilas yadayim for produce other than bread, and they only mentioned it as a matter of personal cleanliness. Rav Nachman, which is going to argue what Rav Nachman said. Rav Nachman, a person who washes his hands for produce other than bread can only be ranked among those who are haughty of spirit. Since the Chachamim did not enact netilas yadayim for anything other than bread, a person who washes his hands for fruit is acting haughty, as if he's making himself to be a person of exalted piety who goes beyond what the halacha requires. Now, why isn't that just a regular case of going l'fin rishus hadin? And because it's too much, it's going over the top. Rabbi Bar Chana said, I was standing before Amir Ravasi, I still come out called the peri, and they brought before them a basket of fruits, and they ate it yudayu, and he didn't wash his hands, and they didn't give me anything to eat from the basket, and each one recited because Hamazon after eating for himself. So Shmamina Tlas. So we learn from this three halachas. Shmamina in netilas yadayim leperes. Number one, we learn from here that there's no washing of the hands for produce other than bread. Shmamina in mezamna leperes. Secondly, we learn from this that we don't join in zimun with fruits. Shmamina shnaim she'ochlu mitzvah lechalek. And we learn from here that when two people eat together, it's preferable for them to separate and recite Birkas Hamazon after eating to bench individually. Because even though we say Revem Hadras Melech, this teaches that it's a greater glorification for the Shekhinah and HaKadosh Baruch Hu when a multitude of people do a mitzvah together than when each person performs a mitzvah individually. Accordingly, when two or more people are required to recite a bracha, it's preferable that to utilize the principle of Shemei HaKa'ina and be yotzei the chiyuv of having one reciting the bracha for everyone else, rather than by having each one recite the bracha on their own. The fact that each one recited Birkas Hamazon individually indicates that this rule is not applicable to Birkas Hamazon, which is a whole shmuz if Shemei HaKa'ina works for Birkas Hamazon or not. Tani Nami Hachi, we also learned in a brayso, Shnaim she'ochlu, two people eat bread together, mitzvah lechalek, it's preferable for them to separate and bench each one individually. By Medvar Mamurim, when was this talking about? Shahayu Shneim Seifrim, when two of them are scholars. Interesting, it's kedai to mention that in Yerushalmi Tainus, there's one Gemara that mentions a Sefer and Safra. One was talking about an actual Sefer, one was probably talking about a Talmid Chacham. But Al Keinikru Chachamim Seifrim, as the Maharsha says in Bava Basra, the Yurim Beis and the Kedushin Daf Lamed, because they would commit their original insights to writing. One is a scholar and one is an ignoramus. Sefer Mevarech Ubor Yotzei, the scholar recites the bracha, and the ignoramus discharges his obligation by listening to the scholar's bracha. We'll stop here for now, and we will continue in a little bit.